Hello guys, trust you're doing fantastic. In today's video, we're going to be talking about how to view the switch MAC address table. Now let's go over to the document, the Cisco Networking Academy. All right, so this is a topology with 2 switches and 2 PCs. We've got the addressing table that has information about the devices, the interfaces, the IP addresses, the subnet marks for each of the devices. Now let's go straight to the objective. All right, so part 1 says build and configure the network. Part 2 says examine the switch MAC address table. All right, so let's take a few moments to go through some parts of the scenario or the background. It says the purpose of a layer 2 LAN switch is to deliver Ethernet frames to host devices in the local network. The switch operates in the layer 2 of the OSI model, which is the data link layer. Now, what the switch does is it tries to learn the MAC address as devices in the network tries to communicate, and then build a MAC address table that maps the IP address to the MAC addresses. Switches deliver Ethernet frames to host devices identified by network interface card MAC address. It says in part 1, all right, so you will build a multi-switch topology with a trunk linking the 2 switches. In part 2, you will ping various devices and observe how the 2 switches build their MAC address table. 2 switches are required for this lab activity, 2 PCs, console cables to configure the Cisco iOS devices via the console port, and then we need the Ethernet cable as shown in the topology. What is the instruction for part 1? It says build and configure the network. That's part 1. Step 1 says cable the network according to the topology. So let's go over to the topology. There are some basic instruction in this architecture, in this design. So let's go straight over to our work environment, which is the logical workspace on the Cisco Packet Tracer. Now we need 2 switches. All right, so let's go over to where we have switches. It says the spec is 2960. So click on 2960. Right, so this is it. You can easily drag over it. Right, so you can also make a copy if you want to. You can come over to edit. You can copy. You can use Ctrl C, and then you can use Ctrl V to paste the switch. Then you have another switch. All right, so in that case, we need the PC. All right, so take the PC over to this part, and then you can drag over it. You can create a drag on it. You can copy it. You can say Ctrl C, and then you can also use Ctrl V to paste. All right, so that makes it quite fast. All right, so we have all the switches. So let's rename these switches. Okay, let's just rename, let's change the physical name A, PCE, and they should be PCB. And let's do same for the switch. We call it S1, and then let's call this S2. All right, so let's follow exactly what we have on the topology and then cable the switch and the PC accordingly using the specified port numbers. All right, so if we have to cable switch to switch, we know the specific cable we need to use. So all we need to do is to go to the bottom of the Cisco Packet Tracer workspace where you have this icon that looks like a lightning. Click on it. It's going to give you a bunch of different cables to connect with. So in this case, if we're connecting similar devices together, there are specific cables we use, and we're connecting devices that are not similar. There are also specific kind of cable we need to use for that. So in this case, it will have to connect PC to switch, we have to use the copper straight through cable. All right, so click on it, connect to the PC. We have the option of the port is the fast Ethernet 0. Click on that, and then let's terminate on switch 1. It's going to give us a bunch of options, the different ports we have on the switch. According to the topology, it says we should connect PCA to F0/6 port on switch 1. All right, so we have 0/6. This is it. And then let's do the same for PCB to switch 2 using the copper straight through cable. Okay, so let's click it on the PC, select the fast Ethernet cable, and then terminate at switch 2. Then it says we should terminate it at F0/18 port. So this is it. All right, so click on that. Then if you notice all the icons are beginning to turn into green, meaning the connection is correct. Remember, I told you if you have to connect similar devices such as switch and switch, we have to use the copper crossover, not the copper straight through. Right, so click on the copper crossover. So now connect it to switch 1. It gives you different port options. So the right port option to select is the F0/1 according to the topology, and then terminate it on the switch 2 at the same port, which is FO/1. All right, so let's give this a moment. It's going to turn into gray. All right, so at this point, we have been able to replicate the diagram on the document. So this is the first task, is to build this topology according to what we have on the document. All right, so the next part is to configure the PC host. All right, so we need to do that using the addressing table. To configure the PC simply means for you to assign the IP address and the subnet mask. All right, so let's begin with PCA. So click on PCA. So once you do that, it opens up this window. So navigate to the desktop option. All right, so let's click on IP configuration. All right, so let's input the IP version 4 address for PCA. For PCA, we have that to be 192.168.1.1. All right, the subnet mask, just click outside this field. It's going to populate the subnet mask automatically. All right, so you don't need to type that. So in that case, we just need to close this box, and then everything is configured, saved. So let's go back to PCB. So we're going to do same. Go to the option desktop. This is the option desktop. Click on it. Click on IP configuration, and then let's input the IP address for PCB. All right, so click outside the field. It's going to populate the subnet mask automatically without you having to type it. So let's close this box, and then that saves the configuration. The next step says we need to initialize and reload switches as necessary. Now this is very important. Now let me explain why we do this. If you go to the field as a network engineer and you've been offered a switch to configure, the first thing you need to do is to ensure that the initial configurations on the switch are totally deleted and erased. Whether it's a new switch or it's a switch that's been used before, this is the best practice as networking engineers or administrator. We need to console into the switch. Now, don't just go directly by clicking the switch and doing all of that. Now, it's the best practice because in real life, there is no how you can click into the switch. You have to connect the switch to a PC using the console cable. So, right. So click on the PC, select the serial port, which is RS232, and then terminate it on the switch. Okay, so which is the console port. All right, so do the same for PCB. All right, so this is the right way to do this. All right, so in that case, then let's go ahead to initialize the switch. So we're going to start with switch 1. Right, so click on the PCA. Now, at this point, now it takes us to the desktop environment. So what we need to do, because we want to console into the switch, we have to click the terminal option, not the command prompt. So we go to terminal option. So we accept all settings. All right, so we strike the enter key. So it takes us into the user mode of the switch. Now, we cannot do this at the user mode of the switch. We have to enter into the privilege mode of the switch. Now, we use this command to navigate into the user mode of the switch, which is enable. Like for me, I like using the shortcut. All right, so EN. So if I press EN, it's going to take me directly into the privilege mode of the switch. So the next thing we need to do is let's see if there are previous configuration on the switch. So we use the command show flash. Shows us, okay, you have no date, you have all of this, you have byte, the total byte. So we use the command delete VLAN. If there's any configuration on the VLAN, so we delete VLAN, we say delete VLAN dot stats. Then it asks, do you want to do this? Yes. Strike the enter key. And then, are you sure you want to do this? Confirm. And then we've done that. Right. So it says there is no configuration error deleting flash VLAN, no such file or directory. So it says there is no such configuration on the VLAN. So most times it's good you do that in case there is any configuration on the VLAN. So the next thing we need to do is to erase the startup config. If there's any startup configuration that has been saved on the NVRAM, so we have to delete it. So we use the command erase startup config. Okay, press the enter key. Then it says, are you sure you want to continue? Say yes, press the enter key. All right, so that is done. So it says initialize the geometry of the NVRAM. All right, so that is done. The next thing we need to do is to reload the switch. Reloading means like to reboot or to restart the switch. So let's use the command reload. So strike the enter key. So it says, are you sure you want to proceed with this action? Confirm, yes, I want to. Strike the enter key one more time. All right, so it's reloading the switch. All right, so this is going to take a few seconds. All right, so strike the enter key one more time. So it takes us directly into the user mode of the switch. So it means successfully we have been able to initialize and reload switch 1. So let's do that to switch 2 as well. So you can see it's reloaded, trying to check configuration, and then everything turns green. You can see now it's green from orange to green. Right, so let's do same for the switch 2. So we have to console into switch 2 from PCB. So at this point, we're going to repeat the same step like we did in switch 1. So at this point, we've been able to initialize and reload the 2 switches. So the next thing we need to do, let's go over to the document and let's find out what we are supposed to do next. So I can go ahead to close this window. All right, so let's say now step 4 says configure basic settings for each switch. So this is where we start the configuration. So this is the proper configuration after initializing and reloading the switch. So the first step says configure device name as shown in the topology. So it means that we need to change the name of the device. All right, so to S1 and S2. It says we also need to configure the IP as listed in the addressing table for the switches. We also need to assign Cisco as the console and VT password. And we also need to assign class as the privilege exit password. So we need to do a full configuration at this stage. So the first thing, let me show you how you can change the name of the device. All right, so let's do that. Let's console into switch 1. Now in this case, click on terminal. Since we want to configure the switch, click on terminal. Okay, accept all settings. Okay. All right, so it takes us into the user mode of the switch. So in this case, we cannot carry out any configuration at this point. So all we need to do is to enter into the global configuration mode of the switch. So the first thing we need to do is to enter the privilege exit mode of the switch. All right, so this is what we use. We use AN, enter. Now, this is the privilege exit mode of the switch. Now, take note of the prompt. It has an hash sign in front of the name switch. Now, switch is the name, a default name given by the manufacturer. So that's what we're trying to change. We want to change it from switch to S1. So let's enter the global configuration mode. This is where we can actually carry out this task. So let's say config terminal. So we call it config terminal. All right, so this name is quite too long for me. I can actually use a very short abbreviation, which is config T. All right, some people can use the word configure terminal. So if I use config T, it's still going to work. All right, so config T, enter. So if you notice, we've been able to navigate into the global configuration mode. Now, if you notice, the prompt has changed. Now you see switch and you see this config into bracket and the hashtag. So this indicates that we are in the global configuration mode of the switch. So this is where we can change the name of the switch. So we use the command host name. So this command helps us change the name of the switch. So whatever name you want to give to the switch, you can specify it after writing the command host name. So the instruction says it should be S1. So we want to give the switch name as S1. So notice what is going to happen. Once you strike the enter key, the name changes from switch to S1. So successfully we have changed the name of the switch to S1. So the next thing you need to do is to disable the domain lookup, the DNS, which means that whenever anybody tries to use the domain name to look up for the IP address, it shouldn't permit that. And also, if you don't type the right command for the domain name, it's going to take you through a loop rather than suggesting to you what the name might be. Rather, it will just keep you in a loop and just continue looping. And each time you find yourself in a loop in Cisco Packet Tracer, we use a combination of the key Shift, Control, and 6 to get you out of the loop. All right, so to disable DNS, which is the domain lookup, we need to use this command no IP domain hyphen look up. So press the enter key. All right, so as long as we don't have any error, so it means that has been done successfully. All right, so let's go over and see what next we need to do. So it says we've been able to change the device name. It says configure the IP address as listed in the addressing table. Now we have in the addressing table, we have the IP address and also the subnet mask. So let's do that quickly. All right, so this is also going to be done in the global configuration mode. So we don't need to exit the global configuration mode. We can just carry on. All right, so what we need to do is to navigate. At this point, we need to navigate into the interface mode of the switch. So, and which interface are we talking about here is the VLAN interface, right? The VLAN one. So we have to navigate into the interface VLAN one. So once we do this, it's going to take us into the interface configuration. Now you see the prompt has changed. You have the config -if, which is the interface, okay, of the VLAN one. So let's configure the switch. So we say IP address. So we write the address of the switch. So the address of the switch according to addressing table, this is the address of the switch. This is the address of the switch for S1, and then this is the subnet mask of the switch for S1. So let's go, let's do that. So we have 192.168.1.11. Okay, strike the space button and then type the subnet mask 255.255.255.0. All right, so once you're done with this, you strike the enter key. All right, so once you strike the enter key, you don't have any error. So it means that you have successfully configured the IP address and the subnet masks of the switch. So the next thing we need to do is we want to change the state of the switch, which means we want to turn it on. By default, the switch is going to be turned off. It's going to be shut down. So we need to change the state to up. So we use the command no shutdown. So once we get the command correctly, we won't get any error. All right, so in this case, it says the interface VLAN 1 change state to up. It means what we have done is we have changed the state to up, means it's turned on. So strike the enter key one more time. It takes us back into the interface configuration mode of the switch. So at this point, all we need to do, the part C says assign Cisco as the console and VTY password. So in this case, we need to create a password for the switch, the console line, so that unauthorized person doesn't gain access into the switch. So we need to secure the console line, because remember, we gain access into the switch using the console cable from the PC. So we need to secure that line so that unauthorized persons doesn't gain access into the switch. So all we need to do at this point is to get into the console line. So we need to get into the line configuration of the switch. All right, so how to do that is we can actually navigate directly. Let's say line console 0. All right, so it takes us directly into the line configuration mode. Now let's go over to the instruction. It says assign Cisco as the console password and VTY password. So let's start with the console password. So the next thing we need to do is to type password. Okay, the command is pass. Now, once you use the command password, you need to specify the argument. Okay, which password do you want to set? What is the name of the password? It says Cisco. Okay, so this is Cisco as the password. So strike the enter key. Now, once you strike the enter key, it means you have set Cisco as the password. But then you need to do one more thing. The thing you need to do is that you need to activate the password such that whenever anyone wants to log on or wants to access the switch through the console line, the password will be prompted. The person will be prompted to give the password before you can gain access. Now, if you don't do this line of command, it means the password you have set will not be active. So once you use this command login, it means that the password that has been set is active. Okay, whoever goes there or wants to access the switch via the console line will be prompted to give the password Cisco. So the next thing we need to do at this point, let's exit. Okay, exiting, if we exit, it will take us back to the global configuration mode. All right, so let's do that. Let's use the command exit. So exit takes us to global configuration mode. Now at this point, we need to also secure the VTY line. All right, so we'll use the same password Cisco. So all we need to do is to get into the line configuration mode. All right, so let's get into the line configuration mode of the VT. So we say line VTY 0 up to 15, so because it has total of 16 VTY. So we say 0 to 15. Right, so in this case, you press the enter key, it takes us into the line configuration mode of the VTY. So in this case, so at this point, we have to set the password. So we use the command password space, use Cisco, because we've been instructed to use Cisco as well. So strike the enter key. So at this point, you don't need to use the login command. The login command is only required when you're creating password for the console line only. Every other part, when you're creating a password, you don't need to activate it using the login command because it will be activated once you have created the password. So at this point, we're going to exit. So we'll use the command exit. So once we exit, it takes us directly into the global configuration mode. All right, so what is the next instruction? The next instruction says we should assign class as the privilege exit mode password. So we also need to secure the privilege exit mode. So for we to be able to secure the privilege exit mode, all we need to do is to use the command enable password. All right, so this will be done in the global configuration mode. So that is how we can do it. All right, so all we need to do is to use the command enable. Now for the other lines, you use just password and then you specify the argument you want to use for the password. But for the privilege exit mode, you have to use the command enable password. So enable password. Once you have used this command, you have to specify your argument. All right. So what is the name you want to supply? What is the password you want to supply? So the instruction says class. So we're going to use class for this. So once you strike on the enter key, all right, so that is done. So the next thing we need to do is to exit. So since we don't have any error, it means that is perfect. So let's exit. So once we exit, strike the enter key one more time. So it's done. So we have been able to do this for switch 1. So it means we have to repeat this whole process for switch 2. All right, so let's go over to switch 2 and repeat the whole process. So let's close this. We're done with switch 1. All right, so if you have watched this video up to this point, it means you have gained sufficient knowledge when it comes to view switch MAC address thing. All right, so at this point, I'm going to encourage you to pay attention to the subsequent videos in this channel. All right, guys, enjoy this video. Bye.